You'd better hurry up and learn to scuba dive, John.
What do you mean?
According to Professor Smith of my marine biology course, a lot of corals and marine animals will be gone in the near future.
Oh, you're talking about the bleaching, right? I heard that too.
Not just that. Professor Smith is the coordinator of the U.S. Virgin Islands Coral Reef Monitoring Program. He's the main guy keeping track of corals and other things for ecological research there. He actually dives all over the Caribbean. He just came back from a trip to Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands and told us that about 1/3 of the coral in official monitoring sites has recently died. That's a conservative estimate at that. He says it's an unprecedented rate. He hasn't seen anything close to this rate of loss in the Caribbean before. The biggest loss of any reefs that scientists have ever seen.
Wow, sounds bad. But how did that happen? Pollution?
Evidently, a 1-2 punch of bleaching from record warm water temperatures, followed by disease, has killed all those corals in Caribbean waters. Among them were ancient and delicate corals that were there when Columbus came,
Columbus came.
We found a colony of 800-year-old star coral. Awesome creature.
Awesome creature of ours inside you.
But it just died in the waters off Puerto Rico. He saw an old chunk of brain coral, the one that looks like a human brain, about 3 feet in diameter. There was at least 90% dead from this disease called white plague. Sounds awful, doesn't it?
Good God. More beautiful things bite the dust because of global warming. You're right. I needed to take up diving yesterday. But can we expect them to come back some way or another? Can we do anything about it?
Well, we're talking about the extremely slow-growing reef-building corals. Some of the devastated coral can never be replaced because it only grows half an inch a year, if that.
The repercussions from that must be devastating. I mean, if corals go, fish will go. You know, corals are the foundation of the reef, and major fish species use coral as habitat and feeding grounds. No more sushi.
What's more,
What's
coral
more,
reefs are the basis for multi-billion-dollar tourism and commercial fishing time in the Caribbean. Also, I didn't know this, but evidently reefs limit the damage from natural disasters like hurricanes and tsunamis. On top of that, recently they're being touted as possible sources for new medicines, too.
Medicines? Really?
Yeah, really. But before we can develop drugs for, say, maybe cancer or some currently untreatable disease, they will be gone for good.
Is it just the Caribbean? Or all over the world? Are we all doomed? I'm getting spooked.
According to Professor Smith, the Caribbean is actually better off than some areas of the Indian and Pacific Oceans. In those areas, mortality rates, mostly from warming waters, the rates there have been in the 90% range in past years. 90%. Can you believe that? He called what's happening worldwide an underwater holocaust.
All right, now I'm totally spooked. Is there anything scientists can do?
Like what?
Like treat the disease or remedy the situation? Anything? Well, what do you think, Gary? The problem isn't what they can do, but what we do. People are still debating whether global warming is real or not. Unreal.
Really? The prognosis is not good, he said. With global warming, scientists are very pessimistic about the future of coral reefs. Then he blurted out, if you want to see a coral reef, go now, because they just won't survive in their current state. He was dead serious.
Sad and frustrating and frightening. Well, did all this happen pretty quickly? Or has something been festering for a while?
Until last year, only a few coral species would bleach during hot water spells, and the problem would occur only at certain depths. But in the summer of 2005, bleaching struck in a far greater area of the region at all depths and among most species. For the Caribbean, it all started with very warm sea temperatures, first in Panama last spring, and it got worse from there. Sea surface temperatures in the Caribbean last summer were by far the highest in 21 years of satellite monitoring, and this wreaked more havoc on marine ecology last year than in all the previous 20 years combined.
It's so mind-boggling. Something so extensive and so devastating is happening right in front of us, and right this minute, but so silently that nobody sees it. Except divers and scientists, of course.
Professor Smith compared it to a scenario where every city in the United States records high temperatures at the same time, and it remains hot for weeks, even months. That'd be just about the equivalent of what happened in the Caribbean.
But how exactly does heat kill corals? I know they bleach or turn white, but how actually does this happen? Do you know?
Actually, corals don't change color. The algae on them does. The heat causes the symbiotic algae that provide food for the coral to die and turn white. Symbiotic because the coral, in return, gives the algae a place to live, I guess. Anyway, that puts the coral in critical condition. If the coral remains without algae for more than a week, the chance of death soars, he says.
Not all of them are gone yet, though, right? Please?
More than 90% of lettuce coral and star coral and nearly 60% of brain coral have already bleached in Santa Clara, one of the U.S. Virgin Islands. And you know what Professor Smith said? He said much of the coral actually started to recover from the bleaching last fall, but then bam! The disease struck the weakened colonies and finished them off.
Sounds like the doomsday scenario for the death of the ocean.
Really? The question is whether the coral can adapt sufficiently quickly to cope with climate change. He thinks the evidence we have at the moment tells us no, they can't. So the fish will
So the
go.
fish
The
will
smaller
go, the smaller
predators will go.
predators
The
will
invertebrates will go. The same ecosystem won't be sustained.
My goodness. I feel like curling up in the corner of my room and crying.
You'd better hurry up and learn to scuba dive, John.
What do you